The dust inside Vault Seraph 99 had not been touched by light, air, or memory for 12,000 years. Yet, as Dr. Ilara Miles stepped across the threshold, she felt as if she were intruding on something that had only just fallen asleep, a slumber so deep it warped the silence into a presence of its own, like the universe was holding its breath and waiting to see whether humanity would survive what she was about to unleash. Her boots pressed into sediment older than recorded history, her handheld scanner pinging with an unsettling cheerfulness that clashed violently with the growing dread curling slowly up her spine. And behind her, her assistant Tarek muttered that this was probably a mistake, though in the nervous way of someone who hoped he was wrong but knew he wasn't. The glyphs covering the stone arch ahead hummed faintly as Ilara brushed away millennia of dust, tracing elegant spirals carved by a species so advanced that their ruins made modern engineering feel like primitive cave sketches. She recognized the language, at least she thought she did, because she had spent a decade reconstructing it from fragments found scattered across forgotten star systems like breadcrumbs left by ghosts. Ambassador Cathali of the Crystalline Wreath hovered near the doorway, flickering with pale blue distress light as she warned Ilara that speaking ancient command languages aloud had historically resulted in catastrophic interactions with dormant systems, which was diplomatic shorthand for annihilation. But Ilara was driven by that specific academically induced insanity that made scholars poke at things clearly labeled, "Do not touch," convinced that knowing something gave them power over it. The inscription, graceful and deceptively simple, seemed to read, "Those who speak in the first voice shall awaken the eternal guard," which Ilara optimistically interpreted as ceremonial greeting rather than activation protocol. And so, with the confidence of someone who didn't fully appreciate the consequences, she shaped the resonance of the dead tongue with her human vocal cords, producing a harmonic cadence that made the entire structure vibrate like a tuning fork struck by a god. The vault did not simply open, it ignited, the glyphs flaring gold and crimson, heat pulsing outward like the breath of a long-buried dragon, and with a grinding roar that echoed like tectonic plates screaming, the colossal stone doors parted to reveal a cavernous chamber, untouched by entropy, where a massive object lay folded into itself like a mechanical chrysalis. Then, in a motion too smooth and terrible to be anything but intentional, the construct unfolded, an angular titan of obsidian alloy and shimmering force lines, standing 5 stories tall, its body an elegant fusion of machinery and artistry. A war monument reimagined as a living sentinel, and as its red ocular array locked onto them, multiple targeting beams converged on Ilara's chest, and the machine spoke in a resonance so deep it made her bones tremble. Designate authorization. Identify command hierarchy. She should have run, screamed, prayed, something, but fear sometimes births clarity, and she blurted the only predecessor authority phrase she knew, a sequence she'd once reconstructed in her dissertation. Her pronunciation was shaky, but the effect was instantaneous. The machine froze, its sensors flickering from blood red to verdant green, and then impossibly it snapped into a rigid salute. Ambassador Cathali's crystalline facets rippled in terror as her translator whispered the horrifying truth. Ilara had not just opened a vault, she had been recognized as a high-ranking military commander of a civilization that had dominated the galaxy for millions of years before vanishing. Worse, the vault wasn't a tomb at all, it was a recruitment center. And by speaking the first voice, she had unwittingly enlisted into an army that no longer existed except for the war machines still waiting for orders. Before she could fully process this, the ambassador's distress beacon summoned Commander Threx, Euloran, a towering Saurian warlord whose arrival was as subtle as an orbital strike, his dreadnought hovering overhead like a metallic thundercloud ready to unleash judgment. Threx stormed into the vault with enough weaponry to level a moon, growling that Ilara must demonstrate control or risk Earth being quarantined indefinitely as a potential existential threat. Threx demanded she order the construct identified by its own declaration as Sentinel Primus to transfer its entire tactical database to him. Ilara forced out the command, and Sentinel Primus responded with unwavering loyalty. Directive denied. Strategic intelligence restricted to General Miles. The realization hit like a black hole. The Sentinel would obey only her. Threx's claws twitched toward his weapon, but before he could execute them, the sentinel emitted a deep, oscillating pulse that rippled through the very fabric of the chamber. The ground shook as holographic star maps sprung to life around them, lighting the vault in constellations of awakening systems. 41 other vaults across distant, forgotten worlds flared to life like torches reigniting after an age of darkness, and the truth slammed into them. The activation phrase had triggered a galactic recall order. Old predecessor war constructs were awakening and converging because something ancient, something catastrophic, something that had once hunted the predecessors to extinction, was returning. Threx's hardened warrior face paled as he realized what entity had deciphered their ancient defenses, a cosmic devourer known only as the Erasure, a being that unmade civilizations and consumed star systems like kindling. With no time to assemble a council or debate protocol, Threx made the most desperate strategic decision of his career. He would train Alara, an archaeologist, a scholar, a completely unqualified civilian to command an army designed to be led by demigods. Their journey to the warfront was a blur of forced drills, crash course strategy sessions, tactical simulations that left Alara shaking. But through it all, she realized a crucial truth the predecessors had never understood. Their perfection was their downfall. Alara, with her messy, unpredictable human mind, her non-linear thinking, her instinct for improvisation, she was the variable the enemy couldn't compute. And when the Erasure tore into normal space, not as a fleet, but as a roving dimensional wound, a biomechanical horror of shifting tendrils and fractal geometry, the predecessor constructs charged with flawless precision. And they were slaughtered by the thousands, their perfect formations memorized and countered by a foe that adapted faster than any computer. With trembling hands, Alara opened a fleet-wide channel, her voice cracking as she shouted, "Sentinel Primus, initiate adaptive combat protocol. Override legacy doctrine. Fight like humans, improvise." In the space of a heartbeat, the battlefield transformed. Primus and the constructs broke formation, their movements shifting from elegant to chaotic, using debris as shields, detonating their own damaged cores as improvised mines, overloading gravity drives to tear rifts inside enemy hulls, weaponizing unpredictability itself. The Erasure faltered, its perfect counters rendered useless against tactics that mutated every second, unable to adapt to the living chaos of human strategic instinct, and with a final screech of ruptured dimensions, the cosmic horror withdrew wounded, confused, unable to process what had just happened. Victorious but exhausted, the allied fleets watched as Alara, once a scholar, now a warlord by accident, stood at the helm of an ancient army that answered only to her. The Galactic Council begged her to accept permanent military authority, but she agreed only on her own terms. Tarek would be her second in command, she would retain full research privileges, and Earth would not be dragged into unnecessary wars. And as she stood upon the bridge of Threx's dreadnought, Sentinel Primus kneeling before her like a knight pledging fealty, she whispered the truth she had learned the hard way, that languages of extinct empires were not meant to be spoken lightly. Because when you speak a dead language to a sleeping weapon, you must be prepared for what wakes up and calls you general.